Speaking of Galileo, we ended last week's podcast with Tannor saying there's a $200 trillion market opportunity. And a lot of people in the comments were like, did Tannor mean to say true trillion? What is he talking about?
No, I mean
believe
200 trillion.
Yeah.
All right.
And
I don't mean the stock is going to grow by 200 trillion. Let me share my screen right now.
So let's get into Galileo's B2B opportunity and this $200 trillion market. Tannor, you can take it ahead.
This is the $200 trillion market. This is straight from Galileo's website, okay? Today, 50% of B2B payments still happen by check, which means that there's a $200 trillion opportunity for digital B2B payments over the next decade.
So B2B meaning like if I buy your software as a service, if I'm a company and you're selling me software, that's a B2B.
Business to business.
So 50% of those things that happen globally is I write you a check for that software.
Paper check, baby. That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I did not know that.
Not only your software, that's like business is like just paying for utility bills. It's like all like transactions just like across the board over businesses, even like mom and pop shops. Mostly I would think is the small businesses in America.
Yeah. And like seriously, it buying software is probably the like Riley said, probably not the most common reference. I'm sure that is maybe the other 50%, but it's the plumber going to get more of his, pipes or wrenches or whatever. I mean, that stuff is done just cash, so either paper checks or whatever that can be transferred over. And, embedded finance is going to be a big part of this, and virtual cards is going to be a big part of this as well. And, Visa is even trying to push this, incredibly hard, but we play a very big line in that chain. So, or a big chain in that line. So,
one thing I like about
$1 trillion sort of thing that I was talking about that I was leaking. Now, what does that actually translate into revenue for our company? We are not going to be the next, biggest company in the world. But what it could mean, because for example, last year, if I have my numbers correctly, we processed $54 billion. Galileo did $54 billion. Okay. Having this sort of massive new, by the way, whenever Galileo actually was acquired by SOFI, there was no B2B market. This was not a market that Galileo was ever going after. This is only since we actually had a bank charter. So now that we have a bank charter, we can actually go after this new total addressable market that should change the total valuation of this company in general. We'll get into the two companies that SOFI has, Galileo and Technisys. And both of these companies were purchased for about 1.2 billion and 1.1 billion respectively. But now, here, I can stop sharing. I mean, you get the point. But now with these two companies, now we can offer a service that both of them can come to market together. Doesn't that change the total valuation for these two companies together if both of them are cross-selling to each other and then also going to market with new companies that maybe they weren't able to go after before? And I've got a great piece for you guys whenever we jump into it. There's an amazing thing that happened. I leaked it on my latest video, but I'm willing to go through with it on you guys here. So before we get into that, any questions on that, total addressable market?
I think that one interesting thing about Galileo, it's really short. One thing about Galileo is they're actually working on gig economy payments. So like we're thinking about replacing checks. That's going to be a huge part of the moving into the future. But also as new like businesses like Uber present themselves where they need to pay people on a daily basis for like so-and-so hours worked. Like I remember the former CEO of Galileo, Clay Wilkes, he was in an interview, he was talking about like how do you pay a welder per weld that he does instead of like doing an hourly rate, because then they just waste their time. He wants to incentivize his workers. And I think Galileo is actually dabbling a little bit into that. So it's kind of cool how like companies are going to be able to build on top of SOFI in the future.
Yeah,
but
100%, 100%. I think Tevis, I don't know if you did you say that you looked into the newest product that they just recently came out with, by the way?
The Cyberbank?
Yes. Yeah. The Cyberbank digital as a service or whatever.
Yeah, I was looking at that, but first let me just talk on the 200 trillion, because I sort of want to play devil's advocate here a little bit, because 200 trillion is a massive number, and I'm just not sure like the feasibility of that amount, right? Because that's taking into account entire industries that are both enterprise small merchant businesses, mom and pop shops, like everything. Like that is the same argument that Bitcoin might use to say, well, if we use 10% of all of the global transactions, we'd be at whatever $1 million per Bitcoin. And it just, there's a whole bunch of, number one, execution risk baked into that. But number two, it's just a little bit, it's really wishful thinking. And it's something that for that to happen, I'm not saying the 200 trillion is going to be captured. I'm saying if 1% of the 200 trillion is captured by SoFi, they're like the world's largest, one of the world's biggest financial institutions. But
so can I clarify something though?
Yeah.
So we already, that's processed dollars. So, for example, like I said, last year we processed like $54 billion. If it's like 20x our business. I mean, it really wouldn't change our valuation. Like it wouldn't make us one of the biggest financial institutions. Not even close. I'm sure Stripe is doing way more than 2 trillion, per year.
Yeah, but you would get a fee from that, right? Like SoFi would get a fee from all processed dollars.
Yeah. But that would probably that would probably be somewhere in the billions of revenue, not trillions.
Gotcha. Yeah. So once you actually boil it down to what is actually feasible minus competitors, and then what is the fee that SoFi actually gets from that? Yes, you'll have orders of magnitude on top of where we are today, but I think 200 trillion is like a massive number for people. I mean, at least for me, just to mentally digest. So it's really good that we put into context in terms of, okay, what does this actually mean for SoFi? Because it's a percentage on a percentage, basically.
Yeah.
If we really think about the Amazon model, it's going to be like super low margins. If we want to beat everybody else, we're going to have to be the one bank that offers the best rate on your transactions. So like the company doesn't have to pay a lot. I mean, do you think that like if SoFi really goes for the Amazon like story, they're going to have to build the infrastructure so they can offer the cheapest product to all these people, and that's how we're going to scale, is by offering at really low margins.
Well, I think the Amazon model, and I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but I think it's a great example of, 20 years ago, back in, or even longer, 1999 or something like this, as Amazon was just starting to get up, for them to pitch the idea of, oh, we're going to make sure that we can actually capture all of this commerce market that's going to go to e-commerce, and people are like, that doesn't seem reasonable at all. Over a 20-year period, it starts to get more and more reasonable. Now, I say 200 trillion as a total addressable market. That's what they're pitching as a total addressable market, not that we're going to capture it all, or even that it's all going to go to digital payments. Maybe half of that goes to digital payments, and then it gets split amongst the top 10, players. But I think what's really important is that we're a business that's going after a insanely fast growing market, and that should only grow into the future. And then even these things that continue to put pressure on our dollar, like inflation, will even help our business going forward, right? The more volume that's getting processed through, payment providers like Visa or MasterCard actually makes the companies do better, right? So those sort of things make it a little bit of a hedge for an inflation. Obviously, SoFi is still prone to, getting hit by inflation because people don't really look at them as a technology platform. It's still like, I still see so much misinformation. People think they're a subprime bank. It's the opposite of what we are. But these are just really good things, knowing that we have a little bit of extra hedge in a market that maybe is hard to find a good security right now.
If we did capture 200 trillion though, that would be pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
What's the multiple on a company doing 200 trillion in revenue? Like, not
for
bad.
sure.
200 trillion.
200 trillion.